Hi everyone, my name is Rajesh and in this video we are going to have a look at how the 10 years career path would look like in an ERP consulting career. So let's begin. Now there are two aspects to it. The first, designation, and the second, roles. The designation is very subjective or company specific thing. Still, if we look at the overall generic designations that are there in this career, then you would find that if you have joined this career as a plain graduate or let's say as an intern while you are still in your MBA or in your education, then in that case the designation would be a trainee consultant or an intern maybe. If you have joined at an entry level or as a fresher, however, after your formal education, then the designation is most likely to be that of associate consultant or associate system analyst or assistant system analyst, something like that. Once you complete, let's say, 2 or 3 years in this career, after that, the designation is going to be a consultant or a system analyst or something like that. Post that, the next level of designation is going to be, let's say, a senior consultant or a senior system analyst and so on. And the last kind of designation would be around the principal consultant or the manager or the lead system analyst or lead consultant, something like that. However, all of these designations are just a vanity. All of these designations are very subjective, specific to the company. So they may not mean exactly the same thing everywhere. So let's keep them aside and let us come to the roles part of it. Now, there are two different kinds of roles when it comes to the entry level jobs. So let's say if you are joining this career as a fresher, most probably you would be working in something called delivery. Now, what is delivery? Now, in one of our previous videos, we have already seen the ERP project phases. If you have not watched that video, I'm giving the link over here. So in that video, we had seen that there are two types of project, the implementation project and the support project. So implementation is something where the client has just purchased the license from the ERP vendor, which could be Oracle, SAP, Microsoft, and then they have engaged this system integrator company to implement the software or to make that ERP software ready for the company's use. And that's where the consultants like you and me would be playing the role of implementer over there. So those are kind of implementation project. And the other projects which are support projects are something wherein the client is already using the ERP software for their day-to-day business activities, and for the enhancements or for the maintenance, for the regular kind of issues that they might face, they need the assistance from the system integrators. And that's where those kind of projects are called support projects. Now both of these projects, the implementation as well as support, are collectively called as delivery work. So in initial, let's say 4 or 5 years of your career, most probably you are going to do this kind of work, which is called delivery. The second kind of work that is available, or the second kind of role that is available, is something that is called pre-sales. Now this pre-sales is very IT industry specific term. So let us understand what this pre-sales is. Generally you would have seen that in any business or in any industry there is something called sales, right? So sales people's job is to get the business, and then there might be delivery, which is like to execute that business. In IT industry specifically, there is something more than sales, which is pre-sales. Now imagine that there is a salesman of, let's say, a water purifier. Now that salesman can definitely sell that water purifier without the help of any technical person, because for a consumer to purchase the water purifier, whatever information is needed, that salesman can definitely deliver or provide that information. However, now consider a complex software like an ERP. Now the salesperson, who may not by the way be having the technical knowledge of that particular ERP product, can he or she be able to sell that ERP software services entirely on his or her own? Ideally not, because they don't have any technical knowledge. So in order to influence the client or the prospective client to buy that ERP implementation services or support services or ERP licenses for that matter, they will need the assistance from somebody who knows the product. And that's where the role of pre-sales comes in. So pre-sales are those people who kind of lay the foundation for the salespeople to close the business. So in pre-sales, there are typically three kinds of works that are there. One is the client demonstrations. So suppose that there is a CEO or a CFO of a company who is planning to purchase an ERP licenses, or let's say that he has already purchased the ERP licenses, but he is planning to kind of decide who is going to implement that particular ERP for them. Now what they would be interested in is to see the capabilities of various implementation companies, and that's where they would call the people from these companies for the demonstrations. And these kind of demonstrations is something that a pre-sales person would do. So pre-sales person would show them that, okay, what are our capabilities as the company, how we can help you implement this particular software as per your needs, and these are the value additions that we will be having, and so on and so forth. So customer demonstrations of the system, client demos of the system is something that these pre-sales people will do as their one of the core works. Second type of work that the pre-sales people would do is around the costing and budgeting. Now imagine if a company is implementing or providing the support for a particular ERP project. How would they decide the price that needs to be quoted to this particular client? Now typically the final price would be the outcome of multiple things, like the cost that is involved, the competitor's price that is involved, the strategic importance of that particular project, the relations between the client and the implementer company, and so on and so forth. So there would be n number of factors in deciding the final price, but one of the major factor is going to be the cost. So how much is going to be the cost to execute this particular project? And this becomes very, very technical to calculate. That's simply because you need to understand the scope of the project very well, like how many entities are there for which ERP needs to be implemented, or in how many countries the operation of this particular client company is, in which the ERP may need to be implemented, for how many users this ERP needs to be implemented, for how many different applications like financials, purchasing, human capital management, and so on, how many applications are involved in the implementation, how many integrations are involved, how many reports are involved. So all of these things will ideally make a scope of the project, and the scope will decide what can be the cost of execution of that project. Another point in deciding the cost would be like how exactly this project is going to be executed, from on-site or from offshore. So are the consultants going to travel to the client location, or are the consultants going to work from their home country or from their base country? That will also decide the cost. Another thing that would decide the cost is the timeline of the project. So is this project going to take 4 months or 5 months or 6 months or 8 months? Now, first of all, deciding that timeline is itself a very, very technical thing, because if you do not have any idea in terms of how much work it is actually to do, how would you decide the timeline? And that is where deciding the timeline, deciding the cost or the budget of that particular project, and deciding the overall project plan are the things that the pre-sales consultant will do as their second job. The third core job of the pre-sales consultant is replying to the RFP documents that are floated by various client companies. Now, in one of our previous videos, we had already seen what the RFP document is all about. If you have not watched that video, again, I'm giving the link over here. So once these client companies float the RFPs, they need to be responded by the ERP implementation companies. And there could be a lot of technical questions that would be there in those RFPs. And that's where pre-sales consultants' expertise will come into picture. To respond to those questions, you need to know the product. You need to know that software inside out. And that is where you can respond to the question in the RFP, whether a particular thing is possible or not possible. So that's the third job of the pre-sales consultant. Now, pre-sales is typically a role or a profile which you can take up as an ERP consultant after some sort of experience in the delivery. Because in order to decide the timelines, in order to decide the cost, in order to do the customer demonstrations, in order to answer to the RFPs, you basically need to have the all-around knowledge of how the ERP project is executed. And that's where the typical career path is like you work 4 to 5 years in the delivery role, and then if you are interested, now this is very, very important. If you are interested or if you have that skill set, then you might transition to a pre-sales role. Now, what is that skill set? The skill set is typically that of a salesperson. Like if you are someone who like to speak, who like to convince to the client, who like to close the business deal. So these are kind of the sales flair that you might have in your personality. And if you have that, then pre-sales might be a right fit for you, let's say 3 or 4 years or 5 years down the line after the delivery role. Another role after 4 or 5 years is something that is called solution architect. Now, who is solution architect? In ERP implementation, there are a lot of decisions that need to be taken, which ideally decide the fate of that system, which ideally decide whether the business can use that system efficiently or not. For example, there could be some setups into these systems which are one-time setups. That means these setups cannot be changed at the later point in time, and they will have a long-term implications in terms of how these softwares will work for that particular client. And that is where the role of solution architect is to decide on how the overall product looks like. So when it comes to a system implementation or a system support, ideally speaking, doing the configuration on the system is one part of it, but deciding how that overall system architecture is going to look like, or overall how the setup should be made, is something that is typically a role of solution architect. And solution architect typically works for more than one projects at a time. So if you are a consultant working in a delivery kind of project, in initial 3-4 years of your career, you would probably be working on one project at a time. However, in a senior role of a solution architect, you might be overlooking 3 or 4 different projects as far as the solutions are concerned, or as far as, let's say, the system architecture decisions or the crucial decisions as to the design of the system are concerned. Next role is going to be about the project management. That could also be one of the transition that you may have after 4-5 years in the career as a consultant. Now, whenever it comes to an implementation or support project execution, there is a project manager who is needed. Now, what's the role of project manager? Project manager may or may not be a person who knows the product. However, if there is someone who knows the product who is working as a project manager, that would definitely give that person an added edge. The primary role of project manager is to administer the execution of project, coordinate between various parties, to decide on the timelines, to see that the project is being executed as per the project plan. These are all the roles that a project manager ideally needs to perform. So one of the transition could also be around the project management side after 4-5 years in this particular career. Another transition could be in the side of resource management or the people management. Now, imagine there is an IT company who has got, let's say, 1000 resources who are Oracle consultants. And on the other hand, that IT company, let's say, has got around 200 different projects. Now, who is going to decide which consultant will be working on which project? Now, again, that's a moving thing. Like for one consultant, one project may get completed in 4 to 5 months or 6 months or 8 months or 10 months. After that, that consultant is going to work on which other project? Who is going to decide that? So resource management or resource manager is somebody who decides that. Now again, for being a resource manager, you need not have the product knowledge. However, if you have the product knowledge and if you are interested in overall people management kind of activities, then this could be one of the roles that might fit you or that might interest you. In this role, if you know the product, then you know what kind of capabilities are needed in executing a particular project. You know what are the capabilities of a particular person as a consultant, and then you can make that right fit in terms of which consultant should be working on which project and how do we manage this entire resourcing part for the project executions. So that's the role of a resource manager, and this can be one of the logical transition for you after 4-5 years. Now this solution architect, project manager, resource manager or practice manager, these are the roles that are typically the mid-level management kind of roles. after these roles, like when you step up the ladder in terms of seniority, after these roles, the next roles could be that of delivery leads for a particular region or for a particular geography or for a particular industry vertical, or maybe the higher level management. However, our focus for this video is not to discuss that, because there would be n number of different dynamic factors when it comes to getting into the higher management or the general management kind of roles. That is something that will come with experience, which we do not need to look at right now. So to summarize, if we look at the overall progression of this career, in 3 to 4 years or 5 years of your initial career, you would be typically working in the delivery kind of roles, which can involve the implementation projects or which can involve the support projects. Post which you can have the roles into the pre-sales division, or you can become a solution architect, or you can become a project manager or resource manager. Now you may find a people who are performing these kind of mid-level management roles for next 5 years, 6 years, or maybe 10 years of their careers. Now that depends person to person, like how fast you grow in terms of the roles or in terms of the hierarchy, or let's say what exactly you want from your career. So depending upon all of those factors, that transition will happen. But you can assume that these particular mid-level roles, which are either the pre-sales consultant or the solution architect or the project manager or the resource manager, these roles you may perform for, let's say, 5-6 years after that. And post that, once you have, let's say, 10, 12, 15 years of experience in this particular career, you might ideally move into the general management, or you might ideally move into the upper level management. So that's it for today. Thank you everyone for watching this video. With the advent of cloud, the ERP solutions are becoming more and more affordable. And that's where even the small and mid-scale organizations are increasingly opting for ERP softwares. What it means for us is ERP consulting as a career option is now more lucrative than ever. So if you are a fresher finance, commerce and management graduate and want to build your career in the ERP consulting industry, then go visit www.yourerpcoach.com and hit that inquire button right now.